Dear students, today we will be discussing about cardinal utility analysis. As you know, cardinal utility analysis is one of the analyses which is used to analyze the consumer's behavior. Mainly there are two kinds of analysis for studying this consumer behavior, such as cardinal utility analysis and ordinal utility analysis. In today's session, we will be discussing about the cardinal utility analysis. Cardinal utility analysis assumes that level of utility can be expressed in numbers, in numerical terms. As you know, utility is the want satisfaction power of a commodity. So that want satisfaction power can be measured in numerical terms as per cardinal utility analysis. That's the core assumption of this theory. Utility can be measured in terms of numbers. Just think about it. Can you measure your satisfaction or utility while consuming a product? Can you say by consuming an apple or by drinking a cup of water, you got this much utility? Can you say so? In practical, it's impossible, but theoretically, we can measure the utility derived from consuming a product. Just like by wearing a shirt and you say, these shirts give me 50 units of utility. So, utility, this cardinal utility theory is developed by Alfred Marshall. That's why it's also known as Marshallian utility or marginal utility analysis. So we need furthermore discussion on the term utility. The utility is the want satisfaction power of a commodity. And the total utility refers to the total utility of a fixed quantity of a commodity is the total satisfaction derived from us consuming the given amount of some commodity. So total utility is the sum aggregate utility derived by consuming some bunch of products or some group of products. So the total utility derived from consuming a group of commodities. And the next case, marginal utility. Marginal utility is the additional utility gained from consuming an additional product. So it is the additional utility derived from consuming an additional utility of commodity. So I hope you got what is total utility and marginal utility. And before we go further into this cardinal utility analysis, you need to keep in mind the various assumptions of cardinal utility analysis. So here are some pre-assumptions for cardinal utility analysis. The first one is rationality of consumer. The consumer is rational. He always seeks to maximize satisfaction from limited income which is at his disposal. That means a rational consumer means a person who will think of increasing his satisfaction with minimal cost. In other words, he'll be looking for maximum benefit with minimal cost. That's a rational consumer. So in all economics theories are based on the rationality of consumer. So if the consumer is rational, then only this theory will become true. So rationality means the consumer will be preferring more benefits at lesser cost. And the second assumption is utility is cardinally measurable. In practical, it is impossible, but we need to assume that utility can be measured in cardinal numbers just like our natural numbers. The utility expressed in imaginary cardinal numbers tell us a great deal about the preference of consumer for a good. And the third assumption is marginal utility of money remain constant. This is one of the important premise of cardinal utility analysis. The money spent on the purchase of goods or services should remain constant. That's why the marginal utility of money remains constant. And the next important assumption is diminishing marginal utility. It says that as more and more of a commodity consumes, the additional satisfaction will be diminished. We will discuss this DMU later. And the fifth assumption states independent utilities. According to this cardinal theory, the utility which is derived from the consumption of a good is a function of the quantity of that goods alone. That means the thing which affects the utility or the satisfaction is the quantity of goods alone. That's the only thing which affects the consumption. If it does not depend on the quantities consumed of other goods, the goods we can say possess independent utility and are addictive. And the sixth assumption, introspection method. The cardinal school assumed that the behavior of marginal utility in the minds of another person can be judged with the help of self-observation. So it says that the cardinal utility of another person can be understood with the help of observation. Next, of course, there are many criticisms to the cardinal utility approach. So here are the important or most highlighted limitation of this cardinal utility analysis. It is not realistic. We cannot say the quantity of satisfaction which we gain from consuming a particular product. So it's not realistic, and it involves psychological factors. It will differ from person to person. So in practice, this cardinal utility approach is one of the impossible analysis. Here we can find the total utility and marginal utility from the consumption of various amounts of a commodity. Suppose you think that I'm giving you a laddu. I think all of you likes laddu. So I'm going to give you some laddus. So first I gave you one laddu and assume that you got 12 utility. You got 12 utility. I mean, when I gave you the first laddu, you are happy, you ate this, you got 12 utility. And I give you the second one, the second laddu. At that time, your total utility when you consumed the first laddu, it was 12, and when you got the second laddu, your total utility is reached at 18. That means you got 6-point increase in utility. And I'm giving you another one, I mean the third one. At that time you got 22 total utility. So you are eating the third laddu. Will you be happy eating these kind of laddus? I mean this much laddus. So now you got 22 utility. That means you got 4 utils increased. And I'm again giving you the fourth laddu. At that time you got 24 total utility. I mean in practical you can think that if I give you 1, 2, 3, 4 laddus, your happiness will be diminishing, isn't it? You'll be very happy when I give you the first one. And when I give you the second one, you'll be happy, but you are not that much happy as you got in first one. And in the third case also, you are happy, you are eating because I'm giving it for free of cost, of course. And when I give you the fourth laddu, you will be eating it. Okay, it's okay, you can eat it. So you ate and you got two extra utils and your total utility became as 24. And again I'm going to give you one more laddu, that is the fifth laddu. So will you be happy or do you want it? Of course you don't want this laddu because you already had as much as you can. And the fifth laddu won't give you nothing special. That means you won't be satisfied, or you won't get any amount of utility from this fifth apple. That means your additional utility will be zero. And still I'm not stopping feeding you the apple. Sorry, not apple, laddu, right? Still I'm not stopping feeding you this laddu. Again I'm giving the sixth laddu, and definitely you will be get omitted. I mean, you will be dissatisfied. So the marginal utility goes negative and the total utility becomes 22. So this is the theory found by Alfred Marshall. We can see the graphical representation of this theory. As you can see here, as the quantity of commodity or the unit of commodity increases, the total utility increases up to a certain limit and it diminishes. See here, this blue line shows the total utility. The blue line shows the total utility. The total utility increases up to a certain stage and it goes diminishes. And the marginal utility, as you can see, it diminishes as more and more of a commodity consumed. As the first laddu, you got 12 utils, and by consuming the second laddu, your utility decreased. I mean, your marginal utility decreased to 6, and it's become 4 by the third up. I mean, third orange. Oh, sorry, laddu, by the third laddu, and it's 4, 2, and it's become 0, and finally it becomes negative. Since you can see certain relationship here, at what point this total utility become maximum? You see, the total utility become maximum, the maximum or the maximum amount of total utility or the higher amount of total utility was 24. See the 24. This was the higher stage of your total utility, and when you got it when your marginal utility becomes 0. So in this theory we can assume that the total utility will be at maximum level when the marginal utility is 0, and this total utility will start to decline when the marginal utility is negative. So Alfred Marshall drawn a theory from this known as diminishing marginal utility. Law of diminishing marginal utility. This law states that marginal utility from consuming each additional unit of a commodity declines as its consumption increases while keeping the consumption of the commodities constant. Consumption of other commodities constant. In other words, the marginal utility or the additional satisfaction goes diminishes as more and more of a commodity consumes. That's the law of diminishing marginal utility. This law is applicable in almost all normal cases, I mean normal goods and normal consumers. And here we can see a relation that the MU, when the MU becomes 0, the total utility is constant and it is at maximum level. And the TU, that means the total utility, will start to decline when the MU is negative. For this also, here are some assumptions. Assumptions of law of diminishing marginal utility. The first assumption is that rationality. I already told you that in case of all economic theories, the consumers must be rational. That means they will be looking for maximum benefit at minimum cost. So just assume that the consumer is rational and he aims to maximize his utility with his available income. I mean, its available income is with low cost and constant marginal utility of money. In order to make this measurement of utility constant, the marginal utility of money should be constant. Then only this theory will become genuine one. So the marginal utility of money will be equal in all cases. That's the second assumption. And the third assumption, diminishing marginal utility. As more and more of a commodity consumes, the utility, the marginal utility diminishes. And the next, it says that utility is addictive. That means we can sum up all the utilities derived from consuming an additional products and we can reach the total utility. So it says that the utility can be aggregated and we can get the total utility. The utility from different commodities can be summed up and we can get the total utility. That is, utility is addictive. The next assumption, consumption to be continuous. One of the most important assumption, consumption must be continuous. In order to make this law of diminishing marginal utility valid, the consumption must be continuous. There should not be any interval between this consumption of 2 units. So there should not be any unwanted intervals. The next, fourth, suitable quantity or reasonable quantity. It also assumes that the commodity consumed is taken in suitable and reasonable unit. If the units are too small, then the marginal utility instead of falling may increase up to a few units. Just think about it. Just think about our previous laddu example. The first laddu I gave you the normal size laddu, and if I gave you the second laddu, it was smaller than, 10 times smaller than the first one. If I gave you the second laddu as 10 times smaller than the first laddu, your satisfaction will be increasing, right? So there should be homogeneity in the consumption. There should be identical size and identical quantity. And character of consumer does not change. The law holds true if there is no change in the character of consumers. For example, if a consumer develops a taste of wine, if a consumer become a drunkard, the additional utility of that wine may increase the marginal utility of drunkards. So there should not be any change in the mood and behavior or the character of the consumer. And the next important one, no change to fashion. No change to fashion, trends and tastes, customs and tastes. If there is a sudden change in fashion or customs or taste of a consumer, it can then make a law inoperative. Inoperative. And the last one, no change in the price of commodity. There should be any change in the price of that commodity as more units are consumed. All the commodities must be same price, constant price. So if there is any change in this commodities price or any related commodities price, there should not be any change in price at all. That's the last assumption. And the next case, the limitations or exceptions of law of diminishing marginal utility. The first case of intoxicants. Who is intoxicants? Think about the drunkards or those persons who addicted to tobacco or any kind of intoxicants. In their case, they'll be happy when they will get more and more of this alcohol or tobacco or whatever. So in case of these addictive commodities, this law is exempted. A person who's a chronic smoker, he'll be happy when he get more and more of cigarettes. And the second case, rare collection. Here also, when the person's having rare collections or hobbies of this rare collection, he'll be more happy when he get additional commodities. So if there are only two diamonds in the world, the position of the second diamond will push up the marginal utility, isn't it? Exactly. And the third case, application to money. This theory cannot be applied to the money or money value things. As you know, as the wealth increases, the people will be happy. So as normal, in case of normal persons, when he gets more and more of money or more and more of gold or more and more of wealth, he'll be happy. So this theory cannot be applicable to money. Then here we are going to discuss some practical importance of law of diminishing marginal utility. This theory is used in wide variety of cases. So here I have brought you the some practical importance of law of DMU. The first one, it is the basis of the law of demand. I hope you know what is law of demand. Law of demand says that when the price increases, the quantity demanded will be get decreased, and it happen vice versa. So the law of diminishing marginal utility and the law of demand are very closely related to each other. In fact, the law of DMU, the more we have of thing and the less we want additional increment of it. So every consumer while buying a particular commodity compare the marginal utility of the commodity and the price of the commodity which he has to pay. So when the price and the marginal utility, there are some correlation, there are some relation. We'll be discussing that relation in our upcoming topics. Based on this law of diminishing marginal utility, our law of demand or the demand curve is negatively sloping. Simply we can say that if a commodity at constant price, which will give you the diminishing marginal utility, in that price you won't buy more, right? But if the price decreases, there will be change in utility also. The law of DME won't work out and people will be buying it more of it. So that's why this law of diminishing marginal utility is basis of the law of demand. And the next, one of the important case, consumer surplus concept. We'll be having a separate discussion on this topic, consumer surplus. This theory, the theory of consumer surplus is also based on the law of DMU. A consumer while purchasing the commodity compares the utility of the commodity with that of price which he has to pay. The price of the commodity and the utility or the satisfaction. A customer will be looking into both of it. If this commodity will give him higher satisfaction than the price, then he will buy it. That's the case of consumer surplus. So we'll be having a separate detailed discussion on the theory of consumer surplus. So the law of DMU is the base for the consumer surplus. And this theory is important to the consumers in a way that a consumer, in order to get maximum satisfaction from his relative scarce resources, distribute his income on commodity and services in such a way that the marginal utility from all the users are the same. So he'll be spending his spending for those commodities whose marginal utility is higher. In short, the consumers will be spending their scarce resources with those products which having maximum utility. And it's also, this theory is important to finance minister. This theory helps in our public finance. How? As you know, our taxation system is Like more tax is charged on rich peoples and very less amount of tax is charged on poor peoples. Why? You know, the poor peoples will be having more utility on small amount of money. You know, a rich person who is having 1 lakh rupee salary per month, for him, a 10 rupee is nothing. He won't be having much more utility for this 10 rupee. But in case of a person who is earning 1000 rupees per month, for him, a 10 rupee is such a greater one and he is having more utility for this 10 rupees. So in such a way, the poor peoples will be having more utility on money and these richer people will be having very low utility compared to poor. So in such a way, more tax can be levied from the higher income peoples and very less amount of tax can be levied from poor peoples based on marginal utility. I mean diminishing marginal utility. So these are the importance or advantages of law of diminishing marginal utility. And we'll be discussing the theory of consumer surplus in our next session. Thank you.